Welcome everyone who is watching this video on YouTube or here in the classroom. This video will be about the Scotch game. So the first game is against Magnus Carlsen. It was played last year. He went for the knight c6 variation. Actually, unfortunately, he was pretty much the only one who played this line against me. So people either played knight b3 or bishop e3. So yeah, this is pretty much the only example, but I wouldn't say it's the average opponent, that how your opponents will react probably is not seen in this game. So b takes e6, and yeah, this is already a rare move. I mean, okay, basically black has two moves like queen f6 bc. So, but yeah, everyone goes for queen b6, queen f6 pretty much these days, because after queen f3 bc6, the according to theory this position is fine, but yeah, I mean it's um, very tough to analyze. And okay, this endgame is like, I don't know, it doesn't offer that much for black. bc6 is much more fighting, with the plan of actually bringing the queen to h4 in the next move. Here white has different options. Many times they start with knight c3 or bishop c4, which are probably not that good. I mean, especially putting the bishop on c4 is not good, and it happens a lot. So I will just very briefly show why. Because after queen h4, there is attack on f2, and also there is an x-ray on the bishop. So once this d5 happens, white cannot take, because the bishop is falling on c4. Anyway, obviously this did not happen in this game, so Carlsen goes bishop d3, queen h4, and he goes queen f3. Went knight f6, he goes bishop e3. So yeah, it's a solid way for white to react against this line. Here I took on e3. It was okay. Bishop b6 is also not bad. So both of these moves are completely fine. So he took with the queen, and now I went d6. It's also somewhat typical that black is not rushing too much with castling short, since given the chance, sometimes some kingside attack is possible. I mean, not really after the trade of bishops, but in any case, d6 is a fine move. So he went knight c3, and I went short castle, and he decided to play g3 in this position. So his point is that he wants to play long castle, but immediate long castle would allow knight g4, and some pieces taking on f2 next, and white is in trouble. So he had to prepare for this, and he did it with g3. I mean, of course, it's also possible to castle short. Normally, it's met by knight g4, and after queen g3 or f4, endgame will come, since if queen f4, black can play g5, and let's say after trade, this is a balanced endgame, like nothing too special is happening. I consider this endgame a little bit easier to play than the one which could happen, earlier at move 5 or 6, when queen f6 is the move instead of bc6. So, okay, this would have been one option. He went g3. I went queen h5. Okay, stopping long castle, so he has to play f3. Played rook b8. He went long castle, and okay, now I switched with the queen to a5. Maybe already some ideas like rook takes b2, king b2, queen b4 check, and then taking the knight, giving up the exchange but opening the king. So he played bishop c4, I played bishop e6, and he played bishop b3. I would say up to this moment, it was a pretty good game. And here I made an inaccurate move, which was taking on b3. So that was just way too early because he took back with the c pawn, and it was really difficult after this for black to create any counterplay basically. So he will just play king b1. The pawn is protected, and it's not clear how black should play here. So more or less he started to push on the king side. I was defending for a while, but then blundered and lost. So what I should have done instead is not to trade this bishop, but try to chase it away with probably with the c pawn would be the most ideal. Unfortunately, I cannot do it right away because c5 allows e5. This is typical for this pawn structure, that is a5, if e5 happens, it just breaks everything in black's position. Obviously, the problem is that after d queen e5, there is a pin here, so there is no c4, and yeah, this is just not very good. So in order to stop this, I mean, black can just start with knight d7 and follow it up with c5, c4, most likely. Knight to c5 is also an option, then removing the queen and pushing the a pawn is another way. Black has very good chances here. So white by no means is better. It's very difficult to create anything on the king side, and with the semi-open b file, it's much more likely that black can succeed here. All right, so moving on to the next game. So here my opponent went for bishop e3, which is I believe the most common move in the position, if I am not mistaken, but yeah, it really doesn't matter that much. Nowadays it's rather knight b3. So bishop e3, queen f6, and nothing unusual, c3, and here the main move is knight g to e7, but the course recommends d6. So the point is that after black goes queen g6 at some moment, attacking on e4 and g2, then the knight can still be developed to f6, and it doesn't necessarily have to go to e7 at all. So that's kind of a tricky line, because as you will see, and you know what I had in my blitz games, very often white goes bishop c4, which is the main line against knight e7, but a serious inaccuracy against d6. So in this game, my opponent played g3, so wants to put the bishop on g2, and typical idea, of course, is to go h5 immediately. Try to create something on the king side. He went h3. I mean, now h4 doesn't make that much of a sense because there is g4. Black cannot really follow up. So queen g6, bishop g2. So sometimes maybe after knight c6, I mean, maybe some problems on c6. Played bishop d7. My opponent castled, and now I went knight f6. And there are already very serious questions for white. Sometimes, obviously, this pawn can be taken. And there is another idea which happened in the game. So my opponent played a4 with some ideas like playing b4 and just go after this bishop, or force bishop d4 cd. I mean, in case of knight d2, the game would be very similarly played. So a4, and here already h4 is very strong. Basically, if white wants to keep it close, then goes g4, and now knight takes. So now white is not in time to stabilize there, and after take, yeah, the game is pretty much lost for white. Obviously, the queen cannot really move. I mean, if it moves anywhere, black just takes the knight, plays bishop f3, and the game is finished. So f3 is the move, and I mean, even if it wouldn't be like immediately uh, game over as it is here, you know, by removing the bishop, for example, black has great compensation, like two pawns, weak king. It's possible to castle long, so it would be already not so easy. But after bishop d7, unfortunately for white, it's even worse because there is no way to save this bishop on g2. So h3 is gonna take this bishop. So in case of king h1, it's immediately trapped. After king h2, one more move is needed, and now it is trapped. And the same is true for king f2 and check and h3 is happening. So basically after knight takes g4, it's not possible to take. My opponent played king h1, but obviously giving up pawn and having a weak king is not a recipe for success. All right, so next game, also this variation with c3, d6. And yeah, bishop c4, I would say this is the most likely move you will face, because this is where white wants to put the bishop, and you know, it's the move against knight g7, so it's very easy to confuse. 95, so this is very good. Bishop goes back to e2, and now queen g6. White castle. So the moves are the same so far, like in the 97 line, it's also bishop c4, 95, bishop e2, queen g6 castle. But here you can see the difference that black has immediate pressure on this pawn. It's even better to start with bishop to h3 in this position. So it's important to know that, you know, whether here or with knight g... Okay, actually with knight on e7, it's possible to take on e4. Here it's super risky to take because some b4 is coming and a4. Queen can get exposed here to knight d2, rook e1, and so on. It's not good, but that is the very strong move, bishop h3. So threatening mate, white has to play bishop f3, and now knight f6. So you can see that it's extremely important that this move f4 is not available now for white. So basically black is just creating threats you know, without any problems. It's difficult to get you know, get out of these pins and attacks. So also now e4 is a problem. So my opponent went knight d2, and okay, here I played the normal move h5, and black is better there, but actually in this position there is a much stronger move for white. Sorry, for black, which is kind of winning immediately. It is knight to h5. So it may look surprising at one moment, but e4 was already protected well. And now the idea is to take on f3. Queen takes back to prevent mate, and then with bishop g4 trap the queen. So that's why the knight went here to take away these two squares from the queen. So yeah, basically if something like b4 happens, then knight takes f3 check, queen f3, bishop g4 traps the queen and wins the game. And in case king h1 happens, it's not much better. I mean, at least it's not over on the spot. After knight f3, gh, knight d2. Okay, white can play something like bishop e2, but if you look at this position, it looks pretty terrible for white with all that weaknesses on the king side. So yeah, this is just a nice idea which would have given great position for black. So next game is already a variation with knight b3. So here bishop b6, knight c3, queen f6, f4. This is a rare move. It's better to go queen e2. My opponent goes f4. Obviously, the problem is that, you know, this diagonal is seriously weakened here. I went knight e7 and bishop d3. Of course, White's point is that if he's still in time to play like bishop queen e2, bishop d2, and long castle, then the position is quite complicated. He managed to get some space in the center, but instead of the game continuation d6, which is just okay, but no, nothing special. Black has a really strong move, very typical for, you know, e4, e5 openings, especially if black is better developed. It's e5, sorry, d5. White is very strong here because e5 is not possible at all, since black takes, and there is checkmate on f2. On the other hand, if white were to take here, then simply knight b4 is coming, and the bishop is open. There should be long castle, rook h2, e8. Really nice position for black, very much better, because white is just not in time with this very slow plan of putting the king to the long castle. And in case of knight takes d5, take knight b4. Basically very similar. Kind of interesting that if white would give this check on e2, black can just play king d8, keeping the king in the center, but, you know, rook e8 is coming next, and it is white who is in a huge trouble. So yeah, basically this whole line is pretty much refuted by this d5 move, and black is just having a big advantage. Okay, so in this next game, white didn't go for f4, but went for the correct move, which is queen e2. So now knight e7, bishop e3, and d6, long castle. I mean, this is kind of the main line, I would say. Bishop d7. This is a little bit important, I would say. So the point is that if the bishop goes to e6, then after knight d5, it's more difficult to take the knight. Obviously, if knight takes, then you can see why, because it gives a fork, and if black has to give up the bishop, I mean, it's also not a disaster, but there is simply no need for this. So therefore, the bishop is developed to d7. And here I would say f4 is a very logical move, and it happened in a few games of mine, but it's not that good. So if you would like to guess the move for black, you can just stop the video for 1 minute. So the problem is with this f4 that allows bishop g4. So basically it's, you know, if white doesn't want to lose an exchange, it's a must to take. But now it's a check on e3, and after king b1, black collects the extra pawn. So this was blundered in this game, and yeah, I mean, obviously black has just an extra pawn and a great position. This is a trick which is good to know. All right, so in the next game, knight e7, bishop e3, here, my opponent went f3, which is obviously a much better move, not to blunder, but okay, protecting e4 and maybe later gain some space on the king side. Swipe long castle. This black is also going in that side, and my opponent played g4. In some way, this is logical because black has ideas like queen to g6 and f5, so to challenge the e4 pawn in this way. But it's probably not the only way to. I mean, it's probably not the right way to stop it because it gives other ways for black. I played g5, which is okay. So I am just trying to use the weak squares after an eventual bishop trade, but probably it was even more uncomfortable for white if I play h5. And the point is that, okay, it's pretty much forcing white to go g5. And now queen g6. So this control, which black wanted with f5, it's not happening anymore. Sorry, what white wanted, and it's not happening anymore. And, black can play f5 even 2 times if, en passant, then gf6 and again f5. And black has just very clear and easy play on the king side. So that would have been probably even better. g5 was also not bad. My opponent should have played h4 in this position. Obviously, I don't really want to take to spoil the pawn, so I would have played h6, but then there is h5, and it's a little bit, difficult to bring knight to those squares now. Black is still doing very well after 95, but I believe this h5 would have been even better. So yeah, so I played g5. My opponent kind of made a mistake here with 95 because after take 95, I mean the knight reached that good squares, the good square, and bishops are about to get traded. He played bishop g2, which is an awful square for the bishop, obviously, and then okay, I just played h5, h3, and basically after h takes, f takes, bishop c6, black just had the better position with the good structure and good knight on e5. But my opponent played correctly, because in case of hg the game would be just very easy, because after all these trades, I mean, for example, knight c4, attacking on b2, and then attacking the rook, and basically at the end of all of these lines, the problem is that the bishop is going to be trapped on h1. I mean, it's not only extremely bad, it's gonna be lost. So yeah, that would have been an even worse position. Right, so long castle, bishop d7, f3, long castle. This is the same position. Now instead of g4, white in this game tried h4. Very similar idea, trying to gain some space on the king side, and in case I would play h5, then it's more difficult to play for f5, because eventually the g5 square can become somewhat weak. So normally I would say it's better not to react on this move. I played rook e8, which is fine. My opponent went g4, and I played queen e6. So, I mean, it looks a little bit slow, but it's also not clear what white is supposed to do in this position, and black just have this plan of regrouping with f6, playing queen f7, then maybe playing h5, and this is always the thing what black wants to do, to challenge this pawn on the king side, while just keeping the position as it is on the other side of the board. So yeah, that was the plan. My opponent played g5, which is a tempting move for blitz with ideas like bishop h3, obviously, but it's not really a huge threat. And yeah, that's the problem of g5, that it immediately allows f5. And he played bishop h3, and I just removed my queen. So black managed to get the move which they wanted, and there is pressure on white's position, and there is zero pressure on black's position. So game continued, takes, knight e4, king b8. Of course, there are other moves. White took, knight c6, went out of the pin, fe, okay, trade on h3. Yeah, I would say pretty normal moves from both sides, and okay, eventually white has a weak pawn on e4, black can play knight e5, some queen f2. I mean, obviously trading queens is also fine. Black has the open file, and also white has one big pawn, so yeah, the end game is pretty good. All right. Okay, and yeah, since I had only one game for knight c6 in the knight c6 variation, I brought three positions from possible theoretical lines which white can choose. This is one of them. You can realize from queen being on h4, knight went to f6, g4, forced h3, and then knight e5, something like this happened. And the typical idea for black in such position is not to castle, which would allow probably white to play f4 at some moment. But a good idea is to play g5. So its positional is also very healthy, but it also gives the opportunity for a very dangerous attack. So that's why it's good maybe not to castle that quickly. So for example, if white plays knight d2, then black can play g4, white takes, and rook g8, for example. And it is not so easy for white. d6 is coming. Okay, obviously, white most likely will lose this pawn. If not, but try some f3, then always h5 is a possibility. So it's basically not even a problem for black. I mean, the main thing is just to open the g file, and the attack can be quite dangerous. Okay, so in this position, rook e8, king f1, so you can see that this position is already, looks quite fun. So both kings in the center, but black is better developed. But white also has some moves to quickly finish development, and yeah, so it's quite complicated. And here there is a very nice move for black, which is pretty difficult, I would say. So obviously, since the pawn is hanging like from three pieces, it's kind of expected to take it. But again, material is not the most important. White kind of weakened his position on the on the light squares, like f3, for example. So there is this nice move, knight to d7, with the idea of playing knight e5, targeting the queen and the f3 square, and also maybe sometimes taking the bishop on d3. And it cannot really be prevented with bishop f4, because then the b2 pawn is falling. So in order to force the matters, white goes c3. Now there is a trade, but it's already like not only black won a tempo, so to say, to bring the knight to a better square, but with c3 also the d3 square can be a problem. So king g2, knight to e5, bishop e2, bishop b7, and okay, this is a very nice position, obviously, with bishops looking over there in the long diagonal. d4 check is coming. Black is already better in this position. And last example, so I already talked about that if the bishop is on c4, then d5 is very tempting. So here white plays knight c3, and in this position, even with seemingly correctly placed white pieces, there is very strong move d5 even here. So obviously now e5 is, I would say, not really good. I mean, if nothing else, black can just pin the pawn and then go knight g4. So ed is the normal reaction, but black goes rook e8, gaining a tempo, queen f3, and now bishop d6. So problems on h2. Now black has to be very careful. Sorry, white has to be very careful, but actually it's too late in this position. g3. I mean, in case of h3, you can stop the video for a minute if you want, and find a move for black. If you found bishop g4, that's great. So So it's a nice way to kind of trap the queen. Obviously, it's not possible to take. So white has to play g3 because there are no squares for the queen, but obviously, such position is threats with bishop h3 and f3, it's just completely losing. So g3 is kind of the main line, and here one more precise move is needed. So in order not to lose time, black is playing bishop g4. So in case the queen would retreat, then just queen h5, again the same threats and same problems. And in case of gh, bishop f3, it's very possible that to get checkmated even without queens on the board. So knight g4 is a big threat if eventually somehow a rook can appear on the h file is also really bad. So one thing is for sure that black is at least taking back the material with a much better position. All right, so this was the Scotch game video. Thanks everyone for watching. If you have questions or comments, please let me know, and I hope to see you in some other video.